Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. About 6 months ago, I sold my old 4K monitor and I picked up an ultrawide. Something I think has been a pretty common theme for a lot of folks over the last year or two. I was looking around locally and at reviews online, and what I ended up settling on was this: the Gigabyte G34WQC 34-inch curved ultrawide monitor. This has a 144Hz refresh rate, it supports HDR10 and variable refresh rates, has a 3440 by 1440 resolution, so pretty standard for an ultrawide, and overall it had everything that I was looking for. I originally started shopping for an ultrawide because I thought it would be better for video editing and productivity. When you're editing videos, you get a nice big timeline, and when you're doing other tasks like software development, you can essentially use this in the same way that you would a dual monitor setup, where you have one editor on one side and a browser or an emulator or whatever platform display on the other. Having that dual monitor-like setup in one single package is really nice, and with a curved display, it almost feels like you're sitting at a command center. Everything sort of curves around you, and that's one thing that I absolutely love about having one of these. It also has great colors and a great contrast ratio, and it handles reflections very good. So at this stage you might be wondering, what's not to like? Well, it's not just one thing, but a bunch of smaller things. Some of these issues are going to be related to just this model in particular, and some are going to be just some general things to look out for in ultrawides, especially curved panels. The first thing that I miss about having a 4K is the pixel density, which I think isn't probably surprising. As I said earlier, this is a 3440 by 1440 panel, where a 4K display is 3840 by 2160. I didn't think I would notice as much as I have, but having worked on higher density screens over the years, whether that be 4K or Retina displays, I do find that the edges around things like text and UI pretty jagged on the ultrawide. I was expecting this moving to a lesser resolution, and if that was the only thing that I was sacrificing, I don't know that it would be that big of a deal. But also, having an ultra-wide ratio like this, one thing that you really notice is almost all of our content is built for a 16:9 aspect ratio. Sure, you do have some games that can run on this 21:9 ratio, and there are some movies and content which will look really good if they use a full width of this display. But if you're not doing a ton of gaming, which, by the way, is probably the ideal use case for this, where you're able to use the full width, it quickly becomes evident that 16:9 is still what we're building most things for. Full screening most media will usually result in black bars along the sides, but sometimes if the video is positioned a certain way in the code, if you're looking at things in a browser, it will actually use the full width, but it will cut off the bottom, which can be quite annoying. Websites can look really strange, and there are a bunch of little things like this. Speaking of websites, if you have dark mode enabled and you're looking at a lot of white text on really dark backgrounds, you can run into issues here as well. On a lot of ultrawides like this that have curved displays, you'll find that they do use VA panels versus something like IPS. VA stands for vertical alignment, and in general they have slow pixel transitions from very dark colors to light, which ends up leading to ghosting or black smearing. In my case, I noticed this as soon as I started scrolling over black backgrounds with white or light text, and while there are some things you can do to alleviate some of these issues, like adjusting overdrive or the black equalizer, it doesn't quite ever fix the problem. Not only that, but the panel doesn't have the greatest viewing angle, so I can move a little bit, whether that be to the left or to the right or up and down, and the picture or the color will change on me a little bit. Obviously not great if you're making any kind of content and you're color grading a video or editing a photo or even doing illustration or UI work. I think if I were to buy another ultrawide, I'd probably shop for an IPS panel and not a VA. A VA does offer more contrast than an IPS panel, but the viewing angles are much better on an IPS panel. Colors are probably going to be a little bit better on most IPS panels as well. The best VA panels will get to about 90% of the DCI P3 color space, which this Gigabyte monitor does, but IPS panels will often go between 95 and 98%, So for someone who is looking for the best color, an IPS panel is still the best route. Brightness is a little bit of a wash between the panel types, but there is one thing related to brightness that I find super annoying with this model in particular. On the Gigabyte G34WQC, when you turn up the brightness all the way, it makes this constant hum. It kind of reminds me of a fluorescent light in an office building or something. And not exactly what I was going for in this space. I'm sure for a lot of people, this won't be bothersome at all. It is fairly faint, and I think that if you have any sound on at all, it would quickly drown out that noise. For me personally, I'm usually working on a lot of video prep, doing a lot of product research and writing early in the morning before the rest of the world wakes up. And when I do that, I do find it peaceful just to work in silence at times. And that hum can kind of be a little bit of a mood killer. It does quickly go away if I turn down the brightness, but it's not something that I am particularly fond of. Again, I realize that this isn't a problem with ultrawides per se, but it is something that I find a minor annoyance, which I think overall is a general theme here. None of these things on their own is really that big of a deal, but when you put them all together, it does start making a pretty big difference. That being said, this is just my experience, and I realize yours might not be the same as mine. If you have a gaming PC and you're able to utilize a full width of this display with this curved panel, I'm sure it would be an immersive and great experience. That's probably the #1 use case for this monitor, as I mentioned earlier, and for a lot of other ultrawides as well. For productivity though, does it have much of an advantage over a 4K? I'm not really sure that it does. On a 4K monitor, I can still do things like split screen windows if I'm coding and working with video editing software. While you do have less room for things like side-by-side panels, I don't know that I notice much of a difference. I'd personally rather have better overall color, better viewing angles, and higher resolution. Again, everyone is likely to have a slightly different opinion here, so drop a comment down below and let me know if you've had a different experience as it relates to your monitor and what you are using it for. If you have any questions about the Gigabyte monitor that I mentioned or anything else that I did not answer in this video, feel free to ask those as well. I hope you found this useful. If you enjoyed it, strike that like button with everything you have in your heart. If you want to see more videos about tech things, and you think that we could possibly share a fourth cousin twice removed, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next upload.